Hey guys, welcome back. In this next VidDoc series, I'm going to talk about some of the more functionality that I've been working on, and some progress I made last night as I spent a couple of hours or so working on this. So this time, what I worked on was implementing a damage, health, player def system. Which I've just gotten the fundamentals or the foundation of it laid out. As we continue to develop this game, we're going to modify it and edit it and add new functionality on top of it. But I felt like it was important to start to get that whole health system down, just because it's a critical component of most games. Most games need some kind of player health system. This is, I know that there's a lot of adventure games out there that don't really use a health system. It's more of exploring the game and, moving from one objective to the next or one area to the next and exploring more and more and more. I did want us to have the flexibility of having a player health system so that we can implement things like damage from environmental things. If there's any AI in this game, which at this point I honestly couldn't tell you if we're going to have AI or not, but if we did want to say, for example, add monsters or zombies or whatever it is, right, that they could do damage to the player and actually kill the player when the player takes enough damage that they have no more health left. So anyway, enough of the theoretical stuff. Let me jump in here and show you what I've got. So you'll notice that as I look around, first of all, I took my little white box level and I made it darker, some more contrast lighting. And you can see that I now have a player HUD. It's real minimal, super minimalist HUD. All it is a health bar at the bottom that's in a light red shade of color. And you can see that as I look across the level, I can see some text that says damage testing area. Again, this is a white box level meant to do R&D and for testing purposes and stuff like that. And you can see there's a particle effect of fire back there. So basically, if you walk over to the fire and you get too close to it or stand on it, keep your eyes on my health bar. It's going to start to go down from the outside in. So it's basically going down toward the center. See that? And there's a few games out there that do something similar. I didn't do that for a specific reason. I was just kind of messing around with the settings and I thought, you know what, this looks kind of cool, at least for testing. I don't think that we want to have a HUD in the final game. We want the player to be immersed in the game. So if there is a HUD, it's going to be a very minimalist functional HUD. So it's going to have very few elements. It's not going to have a bunch of stuff all over the place. It's not going to look like the HUD from say Fallout 4 or something like that, which is a cool HUD. But for this game, we want to keep the player kind of immersed in the experience. So we probably don't want to have a HUD that's in your face and kind of distracting you all the time. So anyway, as you can see, my health is about to go down, and no, this health doesn't regenerate. Could I make it regenerate? Yes, I could. Blueprint lets you do whatever you want, but in this case, my health is not regenerating. So I'm almost dead. If I go back to the damage testing area and kind of finish off my health here, if I stand in this fire, it kills me. It says you died. It fades to black, and then the game ends. There it goes. So it just ended the game. Cool. So pretty simple, basic stuff. Let me show you how I got this stuff working. So it goes across several different blueprints. The first blueprint here is the player character, of course. And you can see I started to mark a lot of these sections of code or script green to show that they're good to go. They're, at the very least, they're in a version 1.0 prototype state. They work, they're functional. They may not be completely polished and fancy, but they are working, and I'm pretty much done with them for the moment, so they're marked green. They're no longer works in progress, at least for this stage in prototype development. Do you have down here, this one's work in progress. I showed you this one in the last video, which was the search functionality. That's still a work in progress. I still have a lot of work to do on that, but I'll jump back to that a little bit later. And I do tend to do that in my workflow. I'll jump around back and forth quite a bit using Xmind as my guide. So as I continue to think of more functionality, I'll write it down right here in this Xmind document. See this? it's starting to get pretty big. It's starting to grow. This is still very, very small. This still represents probably only 10% of game functionality. This thing's going to get huge, and there's going to be a lot of stuff here as I progress further and further into all this gameplay framework type scripting. So over here on the top, I have a player HUD area, again work in progress, and it's really simple. All this does is when the game starts, it creates a UMG HUD widget, and I show how to do all this HUD stuff in a lot more detail, in depth, and step by step in the WeMake course series. So if you want to sign up for the WeMake course, you can do that. Sorry for the shameless plug, but in case any of you want to know how to do game HUDs and stuff in detail, that's the course for you. Anyway, so this widget creates a player HUD, and I can see it right here. If I open it up, it looks like this. Really, really simple. All it is basically a health bar. And if I select the health bar, it's real simple. It's like a light red color, and it's at the bottom center of the player screen. And the only code in here, if I go to the graph view, the only piece of code I don't have anything in my event graph. You can see it's just blank. But I do have a custom function that binds the player health to this widget. So basically, I can access the player's health, which if I go back to the player blueprint, so this guy's going to add this to the viewport, and that's why we can see our health bar HUD. But if I go down here, I have health, and let me show you. If I go over here to the left to my my blueprint properties over here on the left, you can see under the character category, I have a float variable called health, and by default it's set to 1.0. That's not a 10, that's 1.0. So the way it works is 0 to 1. So 0.1 would be 10% health, 0.5 would be 50% health, 1.0 would be 100% health. So you can see here I've got this player damage and death functionality. It's real simple. All it uses is this event any damage node, which basically takes damage from whatever's causing damage to the player. So in this case, it's a fire that's placed in the level. When the fire tells the player to take damage, this guy activates, and it takes our health, which is set to 1.0, and it subtracts a certain amount of health from the player's health every time the player takes damage. So how much health is removed? Well, if I go back to the level, I have this volume right here. It might be a little bit hard to see in the video. It's pain causing volume. Where do you get this from? Pretty simple. If you go over here in the modes tab in Unreal and go down to volumes, if you kind of scroll around, you could also do a search for it up here, but if you scroll around, you'll find a pain causing volume. And if I drop this into the level, basically looks like that. You can scale it and move it around. So if I wanted to, I could take like the polygons on the side, and I can make this you know, whatever size I want. And once I'm happy with that, I can go to the properties and I can choose how much damage to cause to the player. So over here I can say damage per second. So I could say, well, the player's going to take, if I say 1.0 and our total health is 1.0, that basically means it's going to instantly kill the player as soon as they touch it. Which is good if you want to create some kind of an environmental hazard that kills the player instantly. If you want the fire to kill the player instantly, then you know, you would tell this thing to do so much damage that it would kill the player instantly. The pain interval tells this volume how much damage how much the interval of time between causing damage to the player. So in this case, it's set to an interval of 1, so just about every second it's going to cause damage, which is actually kind of slow. So if I delete that and I look at the volume I created here, you can see that I told it to do 0.5 damage per second. Okay, and it's going to be a pain interval of 0.1, which means that at a tenth of a second, every tenth of a second, I guess, it's going to do 0.5 damage, which is a pretty decent amount of damage. As you can see, when I play this in the editor and I run over here, my health bar starts to decrease pretty quick. That's causing a good amount of damage. So when you're working on your games, you might want to test with different numbers and experiment until you find something that feels right. In my case, I set it up with these numbers because that felt okay for me. Anyway, those are pretty much the only parameters that are really important in this pain-causing volume. So if I go back to the player, you can see that as the player stands in a fire and takes damage from this event, any damage. Oh, and actually, I should probably... no, it doesn't matter. Sorry, I was just thinking out loud. So when a player loses that damage every second, it's going to be set over here in the new player health. So the player health is going to be set. So we take the player health, subtract the amount of damage, and set the new amount of health, right? So if we took the health and we removed 0.5, then the new health is going to be 0.5. Oh, that doesn't make sense. It does make sense, but it doesn't. It's not a good explanation. If we take the health, which is 1.0, and we remove 0.1, the new health right here is going to be 0.9. If we remove 0.2, we'll end up with 0.8. For those who are math challenged, I'm a math challenged person, so I need people to explain math to me that slow and that simple, because I'm just really bad at math. So so then we take the health, right, and we're always checking every time we take one of these event damage, which is every 0.1 seconds according to the pain causing volume I put in the level. We're going to be checking to see how much the health is, right? Because in the game, if the player's health reaches 0, that probably means they're dead. So we take the health, we check and make sure, is the health less than or equal to 0? If that's true, then we start this sort of death functionality. The first thing that I do is I disable input so that when the death screen pops up and it says you have died, right? The player can't run around, the player can't walk, the player can't do anything, they're dead. And eventually, once I start polishing this up, I think what I want to do is like a first-person camera animation or something, of almost making it feel like the player dropped dead to the floor and the camera's kind of sideways and looking down like a hallway or whatever, or wherever it is, so that it looks like a camera that fell. Like imagine you're holding a camera, you just drop it on the ground. Something like that. Well, I don't want to make it feel like a camera. I want to make it feel more like it's the player's face that landed, his body hit, or his or her body hit the floor, and the player's now dead. And then you see the screen or the text on the screen that says you have died, to remind you that you failed. And then what I do is I get the game mode and I cast to my own game mode, because remember, we're creating our own game mode called LTBL game mode play. Is that correct? Yeah. It's kind of a weird name. I don't know. I might change that name later. So once we get to that game mode, we access this player died custom function. So if I come in here, I've got this custom functionality, and this is the game mode, by the way. That's what this blueprint is right now, LTBL game play. So if I go to the level and I go to the world settings, this is pretty basic, but for those who don't know, there's a game mode override here where you can tell it what game mode to basically to play for this level, right? And I created a custom one called LTBL game mode play, and that's basically the standard game mode that's going to eventually track your objectives and your progress through the game and stuff, and it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll show you in a bit some of the stuff that I got planned out for it. But here it is. Here's the custom event. Again, this is the player blueprint, right? When the player dies, right, no more health, player's now dead. We take away input so the player can't move anymore, and then we go into the game mode and we activate this player died function, which if I come in here, it's actually a custom event, but it's technically a chain of functionality. So I like to call them functions, even though technically it's not a function. Anyway, so we take the custom event here, the player died, and then we create a new HUD widget, which is this one over here, which basically says you died. And it starts off like this, and it has an animation that plays, and when the animation finishes playing, basically it fades to black like this. Now there's a lot of ways to make the screen fade to black. One of the most popular methods is to use Matinee and create a director track and animate a fade using that. I've done that before. It works. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. If you want to do it that way, that's perfectly fine. In this case, I used a HUD widget, in which case I added this this image element right here, right, which I called black, and it basically is just a big solid color that encompasses the entire screen of the player, and its opacity is set to 0 at the beginning. So basically it's always there, but because its opacity is 0, you never actually see it. And then it animates from 0 to 1, from being completely transparent to being completely opaque, and that transition makes it look like the screen is fading with the text UDI'd in front of it. Now, in order to get the text UDI'd in front of it, you got to change the Z order over here. So the text has a Z order of 1, and the black background has a Z order of 0. By default, this Z order is always 0, and if it's 0, you can't see the text. So for those who don't really know or are not too familiar with UI and UMG and Unreal 4, you need to make sure that that Z order, whatever you want to be rendered on top of stuff, has a higher number. So if I had like a picture or some image, or maybe an image of some splattered blood on here, I would probably want it to have a Z order of 2. That way it's on top of the text and on top of the black background. You know, if you wanted to have some splattered blood on top of this "you died" message. And this is just placeholder for now. Eventually we're going to have something a lot cooler and nicer with some nifty animation and some other stuff. But that's polish work. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So if I go back to the game mode, again, just to quickly run through this, when the player dies, we get the player controller and we draw HUD on that player. The HUD is the HUD died, which is this one, right? We add that to the viewport. We access the fade to black animation. So if I go back to the HUD died, you'll notice that down here I've got an animation, only one. It's called fade to black. And it's this animation right here that makes this fade to black. And we play this animation. We loop it only once, which basically means it's going to play one time. You can make it play over and over again if you wanted to. And that's useful if you want like a health bar to kind of flash on and off when the player's taking damage, which would be pretty cool, right? And we could choose if we want the animation to play forward, reverse, or we want the ping pong back and forth and oscillate. Then I have a little delay here of 5 seconds because I didn't want the game to just end abruptly. I want you to stare at that "you have died" screen with the black fade for about 5 seconds after it's done. And then the game quits, which is pretty simple. All it is you get the player controller and you run a quit game function on it, which basically ends the game. Okay, so yeah, I think that's about it. Let me see. As for the game mode, I still have a lot of functionality to add to the game mode, which I'll show you a quick peek here. If I go over to the game mode area, campaign game mode, I kind of rewrote a lot of this stuff. But my game mode, I added a bunch of functions. I want the game mode to do all of this stuff here, and I probably will be adding a lot more functions as the game prototype continues to progress. But some of the important things is the player died function, and you can already see that functionality, or at least the beginning of that functionality happening here with this stuff, right? So I'm starting to put it together. Game mode will eventually control player spawning, so I wanted to control that. So this whole sort of sequence of events, where when the game loads in, the player spawns, we give the player inventory. The game mode should also load the player's save data based on the checkpoint that they reached. So if you played the game and got halfway through and then you called it a night, you come back the next day to play, the game mode is going to look at your save data, your automatic checkpoint save data, and go, okay, here, let's load up the game's or the player's last status, right? So the player had found the hammer, so give him the hammer. The player had 75% health, so give him 75% health. etc., etc. We'll have a save game mechanic, load game mechanic, load inventory from the save game mechanic, and also very important, since this game is objective oriented, meaning that as you progress through the story, you complete objectives, and you continue to progress that way. I want some kind of functionality that's going to track the objectives that the player's completed, and it should receive this data from special blueprints in the game. And I haven't gotten to that part yet. That'll come later on, way later on. And then, of course, the end game complete function, which basically, once the player beats the game and completes all the objectives and they've reached the end of the game and they finish, this guy here should realize that that has happened, and it should kick in, and it should do a whole sequence of events. I don't have it really written down here, but one of those things is going to be the tally of the player's final score. Like, for example, how long did it take the player to beat the game? How many times did the player die or failed the game? Things like that. Did the player find any secret Easter egg items and things? And based on your score or what you did, we're going to tally up a final score and give you like a rating, right? So maybe you beat the game with like an A+ rating. Maybe you did really bad and you got a C rating or something like that. And maybe if you get a really good rating, like an A+, you unlock some kind of new thing or something, right? Like the old Resident Evil games and stuff like that. Like those games, I miss that kind of stuff. I thought that stuff was really cool. It kind of sucks that nowadays games don't really do that anymore, which is kind of a bummer because I used to love that stuff. Also did a little bit of addition here to the interact function stuff, but you know what? When I get to that stuff, we'll have a VidDoc series that kind of focuses on the interaction functions and interactive object parent class and that sort of thing. Cool. So that's pretty much it. Also, one last thing. I've started to highlight stuff in green as I finish them. That way I can look at this whole thing and I can quickly do a really fast read with my eyes, and I can tell what's complete and what's yet to be completed. And it kind of helps motivate you and stuff, because you can start to see once this graph gets huge, it looks kind of daunting. Like, wow, I have a huge mountain to climb. And creating video games is crazy daunting. There's so much stuff that you have to do and program and script and get to work just right. And then you have to polish it all so it all works really good when the player plays the game in the end. So I basically highlight stuff in this soft green color to start to show me when stuff starts to come online and when stuff is pretty much done and ready for playtesting and stuff. So you can see here I've got my walk, sprint, crouch functions, my flashlight function, the zoom function when you do a search. All that stuff is green, so it's good to go. It's ready for playtesting. Yeah, so as I finish stuff, I'll be highlighting it in green, and hopefully at some point in the future, this whole thing will be green and the game will be complete. Really early to start thinking about that now, though. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's pretty much all that I wanted to kind of recap and show you with the current progress of the game. I'll see you guys next time, where I'll show you more cool stuff of what's been done.